I'm back with more fiction book recommendations for you guys, including thrillers and YA and fantasy and romance or whatnot. So if you want a new fiction recommendation for you, even if you're a beginner, because I do have beginner friendly recs in here, watch this video, you will get one. Let's get into it. Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing very nice. I'm sending a lot of hugs and positivity to all of you. Hi, if you're new, welcome to the channel. I really hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please do consider subscribing. I am putting timestamps, so if you want to go straight to the recommendations, you can. But before we start with the recommendations, I wanted to give you guys a few updates about my reading. The last time I made a wrap up was I think 2 to 3 months ago, and I have not made one since because I feel like I have been in a reading slump, an on and off reading slump in the past few weeks, where I will pick up a book and I will finish it in one day. I will pick up another book the next day, I'll finish it in one day, and then I won't read for like 10 days or 15 days, and I really don't know what's going on. On the other hand, I have also been picking up books. I read it till halfway through and the book is actually really good, and then I just drop it. I soft DNF it, which means that I will be picking it up in the future, but for now I have DNF'd it. And it's not even because the story is not interesting. For some reason, books are not able to hold my attention for a long time right now, and I feel very hoppy in my head. There are so many books I want to read, but I'm not able to read all of them at once, and that is really annoying me. And my brain is like, pick this up, pick this up, pick this up, and I pick it up and I read halfway through and I'm like, oh, but I really want to read that too. I pick that up. Then I order a new book and I'm like, I really want to read that too, so I pick that up. So that's what's been happening, and I feel like I have read so many books honestly in the past 2 to 3 months, but at the same time I have not read anything because I don't finish those books. That is why I've not made one of these videos recently, honestly, because I thought it will not be interesting at all to watch. But I was making a list of all of the books that I have read recently, and I saw that I have around 20 books. Plus I have also been seeing you guys commenting on some of my videos saying that you want a wrap-up video and you want me to talk about the books that I have read recently. So I was like, you know what, it's time I make this video. So here I am with a wrap-up video, or a yap-up video, if you will. I'm obsessed with this t-shirt. It's by Frankly Wearing. I'll put the link in the description if you want to get it. I got 4XL because that is truly oversized for me. Love it. I'm going to give star ratings to each of the books, and I'm not going to talk about them in order because I don't remember the order. Starting with a very shocking and amazing book that I read. It's shocking because I genuinely did not think that I will enjoy this book this much. Also, there is so many things in the book that actually ick me a little bit, and despite that, I enjoyed this book from the core of my heart. These characters are so memorable, and this is just part 1. I have part 2 and I cannot wait to read it. It's also shocking because it's around 700 to 800 pages, and 700 to 800 pages without much plot going on. It's more about the characters, and you would think that that would get me bored. I would think that that would make me bored, but the shocking part is that it didn't. I can actually read the other 700 800 pages written about these characters because I am so obsessed with them. The book is Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. I only read this book because of Destiny's recommendation. Destiny is obsessed with this book, and so I was like, I'm going to get this book. I got it last year, but it has been on my shelf since so long because I just felt like it's not my kind of a book. But then recently, when I was going through the slumpy phase, one of the things that I do is just pick up a random book that I think that I would never pick up, like generally, or pick up a book that is not meant for a video, and that is what I did with this one, and it turned out to be a 4-star read for me. This is the story of Johnny and Shannon. Johnny is this hardcore sport guy. Both of them are in high school, by the way, and Johnny is this hardcore sport guy. He is extremely serious about it. His entire life depends on it. His entire lifestyle surrounds these games that he plays. And then we have Shannon, who is going through unfortunate circumstances at her home where she does not feel safe at all because of everything that is going on. And then these two characters cross each other's path and the magic happens. So many things right with this book. One, it has dual POV. That right off the bat makes me so happy because I love to get into the head of the characters. The way it's written, even if it is such a thick book, it did not feel like a thick book because it's so easy to read. Number 3, very fleshed out characters. I have said this so many times before. If I'm reading about a character and I know what they would do in a real life situation because I know them so well, because they were written so well in the book, I am obsessed with those characters, and that is exactly what has happened with this one. For the slow burn aspect of it, I am obsessed with slow burn romance, and this book is the slowest burn ever. It was so much fun. 5, the emotional quotient of the book. It gets so emotional, so intense. The characters are so vulnerable with each other. So many things right with the book, which is why it is a 4-star read for me. The only reason I've not given it 5-star, even though it does give me slightly 5-star feels, is because 1, the language used in the book, it is a little off-putting, and I have been trying to avoid it whenever I think about the book, but I'm not able to. There is a lot of cussing going on, and that is something that I just can't avoid. And 2, a little bit here and there in the middle, it did feel a little bit dragged out. I would not complain about it, but I do know, like, objectively, that it was dragging out and it was not completely necessary for the story to go on. We did not need those parts at all, and so it is not a 5-star read. But apart from that, I am obsessed with this book. I am obsessed with these characters. Please do read the trigger warnings because it gets very intense. I actually, even though I have not gone through the things that the characters are going through, I felt quite a bit triggered, and I was just my heart rate was really high for some time when I was reading the book, because it is written in a way where you get very empathetic with the characters. You can read it if you are a beginner, but I don't recommend it to teenagers. Even if it is said to be a YA romance, even if the characters are in high school, I think that the themes in the book are very intense for teenagers. Moving on to something light and also meant for teenagers, we have Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter, which is the second part of Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. Better Than the Movies is definitely one of my most favorite YA romances, and recently I have been struggling to find good YA romance books, which is why I was so excited for this book, because I already knew the characters. I knew it would be easy for me to get into the book. I knew that I would enjoy the YA aspect of it, and guess what I did? Even though the characters are not actually, I mean, are they counted as young adults? Because they're around 21 year old now. Liz and Wes have stolen my heart again. This is the story of Liz and Wes when they get into college, and this one also has dual POV. That was one of the things that I wanted from the first book, that we also get Wes's POV, and in this one we get it. However, the book has completely shifted its tone from the first book. The first book was so cheesy. It was not intense at all. It felt like a fluffy cloud to me. On the other hand, this book actually gets intense. Not extremely intense, because I don't know how to find Lynn Painter's writing extremely intense. Her writing is just so warm, but it does discuss intense topics. Wes is going through a rough time, and Wes and Liz are not together in this book. So we get to see what exactly happened, why they are not together, and what happens to the future of their relationship. I think it's called Nothing Like the Movies because this is not exactly like the rom-com kind of love where everything is perfect. It gets a little more realistic. Even then, if you ask me, it's very fictional. So I'm not telling you to set your standards based on this book, okay? Not in that way, but it does get more realistic than the first book. Liz is completely different from the first book. Wes is quite different from the first book. Basically, yeah, the entire tone of the book is very different, but that is what I enjoyed about the book. I like my books with a little bit of intensity where the characters are being vulnerable with each other, 1, and 2, the slow burn in this book too. I love slow burn. Thirdly, there are so many questions to be answered that keeps the mystery alive in the book. It's not your normal rom-com that you know that in the end they will get together. Of course, that is the major aspect of it, but what exactly happened in the past, that does not get solved within like 2 chapters and then you're done with it, because sometimes the predictability of a rom-com makes it a little boring. But in this one, because you wanted to know what the mysteries are, you keep on reading. Next up, we have a YA dystopian series. This is one of the cases I was talking about where I would read 1 book a day or 2 books a day, and then I would not read for an entire week, because once I started with this series, I did not keep it down. I was totally obsessed with it. I think I read 2 books and no, 1.5 books in one day because I could not stop myself. It's also the OG classic book. It's not actually a classic, but I know that all readers have read this at some point. My brother was a teenager when he read these books, and I remember it having a lot of hype at that time, but I was not a reader at that time, and so I did not read it. But now when I did enter the reading world, I knew that at some point in my reading journey I'm going to be reading these books, and I wanted to see that even if I'm older, is it still going to excite me? Is it still going to be worth the hype? And it totally was. It is a total 5-star 6-star series. I gave this book 4 stars. The series, on the other hand, is a complete 6-star series for me. Even if I did have, okay, I'll tell you what my reservations about the last book. But the series I'm talking about is the Hunger Games trilogy, all 3 books. I do have a reading vlog on it. You can check it out. It'll be in the description. This is a story of a different world where the Hunger Games is held every year and 2 volunteers go into it from each district, and Katniss is forced into that situation from District 12. The only way to survive this game is you have to kill everybody else and you have to be the only one alive, and we see the journey of Katniss in these games. That is all I'm going to tell you because that is sort of what I knew about the book before I went into it, but there is so much more that happens in this series. Oh my god, I was hooked on the book from the very first chapter, and that happens so rarely with me. I always feel like you have to give a series some time to become good, especially since I read ACOTAR, honestly, because the first book in ACOTAR is so mid and then the second book is really good, and even then in the second book you have to wait quite a lot for it to get very, very good. So I thought that the same thing will happen with these books too, but no, right off the bat, awesome dawsome. I can see how it would grip a teenager's attention. So if you are a teenager, go ahead and read this series if you have not read it. Oh my god, yes, all the teenagers of this time, read these books. It's going to be awesome for you. I enjoyed all of the characters, I enjoyed the storyline, I enjoyed the romance in it, and I love the fact that the romance was actually such an essential part of the plot and not just like some side subplot going on. That made the romance so much more intense, along with, yes, once again, the slow burn aspect of it. The first book, exciting, adrenaline pumping, easy to read, and the writing style is ferocious. I'm obsessed with it. The second book was my favorite book because of just how many things happen. There was twists after twists after twists. Even if it is not a thriller at all, there's just so much happening, and because you're so attached to the characters from the first book, everything that happens in the second book just hits harder. The third book actually changes the pacing. The twists are still there and we have a few more additional characters, but I did not enjoy the pacing of the book as much as the first 2 books, firstly, and secondly, even the side characters, and thirdly, even the final wrap up of the book. I think that some things happened that were a little unnecessary and it just elongated the entire series, and I think that it could have been wrapped up in a different, shortcut, easier way. However, did that take away from the entire series? No, not at all. There is so much read between the lines going on if you want that to happen, and even though there are no direct quotations like with beautiful writing, I have marked these books so much because of the way so many things that are very important to say have been said very clearly in a very raw manner. So if you're looking for a fun, adrenaline pumping series, this is your series. And if you're also looking for a series where you read between the lines and have fun with that aspect of it, then also this is your series. Great for beginners and great for teenagers. Next, I read a very, very depressing book, and I know that a lot of people love this book and I can totally see why, but I am not obsessed with this book. I don't think I will ever reread this book, and even now I do think about this book way too much and it has impacted my life. I just don't like the impact that it has. It makes me extremely depressed and it makes me feel like nothing matters, and I just do not like that feeling. However, the writing in the book, amazing. It is a memoir, so the story, the life story, is beautiful and it can be very, very inspiring for a lot of people, and I can see why. The book is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. It is the memoir of Paul, who was a neurosurgeon. You follow his life from the point where he wants to become a neurosurgeon, and then you see his entire journey of how he goes with it and what the results are, till the point where he is diagnosed with cancer. And now the thing is, we see his perspective as a doctor of when he is looking at patients with cancer, and then we see his perspective as a patient. The beauty of the book is we see his perspective as a doctor on cancer, and then we also see his perspective as a patient on cancer, and how the dynamic is, the reflections that he has as a doctor and as a patient. That was very interesting for me to read. Also, it's a very short book, so it did not take a lot of time for me to finish. It was very easy and simple to read too. The only reason it became a little depressing is because the way a doctor looks at a human body or a human life, and the progression of this doctor going from just a human being to going to a doctor, and then looking at human beings from the lens of a doctor, and then becoming a patient, and then looking at everything from the lens of a patient, the human body, human lives, human relationships. Somewhere in the middle, it honestly felt like everything is just machinery. And I think at the end of the day, the book just gets too real, and maybe I was just not ready for it. And so when you go into the book, please do read the trigger warning. So in all, I did think that the book is inspiring and beautiful. I just did not enjoy the book because I just was so caught up in all of the sad parts of it. I'm not gonna give this book a star rating because it's a memoir and I just don't feel like I can give star ratings to somebody's life, but this is what I think. Now you just decide whether you want to read it or not. Next up, I have a sci-fi recommendation for you guys. Even if you're a beginner, you can start with this book. It is book 1 in a series. More books are to come, and I understood everything that I was reading in the book, which is why I say that you will also probably understand everything going on in the book. The book is The Scent of Redemption by Shreyan Laha, which is a story of a doctor who administers an untested vaccine on a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old dies, and that in itself is so horrible. But it becomes even more horrible because this book is set in 4000 AD, where death is not a normal thing. And so because the doctor does such an irredeemable act, he is now exiled to a different place where he comes face to face with entities that he is not very equipped to fight with, and we see his journey. It's short and easy. It's short and it's very easy to read, and it sort of reads like a game filled with adventures, but it also has a deep side to it, how his environment is affecting him and his reflections on it. It's a very power-packed book because of so many things happening, but it also being so short, so it's very airtight. It does not waste a lot of time. Innovative and it's creative, and I cannot wait for the second book myself. Next up, I read a YA fantasy romance that I had been wanting to read since so long because it is an rivals to lovers. Some of you may have already guessed the book. It's a story of two people who work in the same place. Iris is going through a tough time, and so she decides to write a letter to her brother who is off at the border fighting the war of gods, but that letter, instead of going to her brother, goes to her rival. The book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. No god, no war, no one can come between them. A beautiful story. Oh my god, the writing is so beautiful in this book, and the characters with each other. The chemistry is one of the best chemistries I have seen in a long time between two characters. Barely any miscommunication happening, which just makes me so happy, even if they're just writing to each other. And the letters that they write to each other is so vulnerable. Oh my god, you guys know I am obsessed with people and with characters that are vulnerable with each other, and this is the peak of that. I also love both of these characters. There's also the right amount of slow burn in it. It has multiple POV. There's just so much goodness in this book, and so I gave this book 4.5 stars. I've still not given it 5 stars because this is a fantasy book, and the awesomeness of a fantasy book is that it can go so much more deeper into romance than a normal book can. This one felt more like a romance set during a war in our normal world. It felt like a historical romance to me, and while I loved everything about that historical romance part of it, I think that the fantasy was severely lacking. There were a few creatures here and there, and the typewriter was a little bit of magic, but I feel like there was so much more that could happen. Plus, the title says Divine Rivals. Where is the divinity? I was not able to capture the divinity at all, almost in it, and so that really made me mad, which is why I have given it 4.5 stars instead of 5 stars. Now, I have seen a lot of people say that Ruthless Vows is less about the romance and more about the war that was going on in this, and so I am actually very eager to read it. I've seen people not liking Ruthless Vows because of that, but I think I will enjoy it more because the fantasy element will hopefully be way more in that book. So I'm excited to read that, and hopefully that will be in the next wrap up. Next up, I read a short Japanese fiction literature. It is a 6-star read for me. I am so obsessed with this book. I think about this book literally every single day since I've read this book. Not one day goes by actually when I don't think about this book, and the book is The Lantern of Lost Memories by Sanaka Hiragi, translated by Jessie Kirkwood. This is a story of a world set beyond our world. So once you die, you wake up in this place, and you wake up with all of the pictures from your life, from every day of your life. You select the pictures that you want to go into this magical lantern, one picture for every year, and then this lantern shows you your entire life. So my entire life flashed before my eyes when I died, made real in this book, and I am obsessed with this concept. I thought it's going to be a cozy fiction book with this great concept. So I was so excited to read this and have a cozy time, maybe give it like a 3.5 4-star rating. And it actually started out like that too. The first chapter was nice, but as I moved forward and everything tied up together, oh my god, I am obsessed with this book. This is a progressive book where it gets better with each page, and you need to read the entire book for the full experience to know how you feel about the book, and not just like, oh, the first half was good and the second. It all ties up together, all loops closed, and that is one of my favorite parts about the book. The second favorite part, no, actually that is the first favorite part, is the emotional quotient. Oh my god, it is such an emotionally deep book, hitting the right parts of your heart, and all of that with such simple and beautiful writing. I think it's translated very well. So if you're a beginner and you want to start with Japanese literature, even if you were a teenager, especially if you're a teenager, I highly recommend this book to you. You will not regret it. Next, I have another book that was very highly requested by you guys. It is a story of a bunch of children who live in a hospital because of all of the diseases that they have, and their friendship and what happens. It is more of a character study because you're just following all of these children and what they do. So as you move forward, like towards the end of the book, you do see that there is a little bit of plot too. The book is I Fell in Love with Hope by Lankali. This book was first self-published and it has been on my TBR since then, but it was then picked up by a publisher just because of how awesome it is. I was promised tears when I was reading the book, but I did not have any tears, and I think one of the main reasons was because I was expecting to cry, but also another reason was because this book is so beautifully written and I really appreciate it. I mean, there are so many quotations that I have marked because of how beautifully it's written, but as I moved forward, I feel like it was just too beautifully written, and I know that shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing for me. Every single line was decorated, every single line was written in a complicated way, and I just felt like at a certain point I would like it to just be simple writing so I can connect with the characters, so I can connect with what is going on. Because the writing was so poetic, I got so tangled up in the writing itself. The raw emotion was not delivered to me, and I think that was one of the reasons why I did not cry, because it was too beautified. But apart from all of that, the story was beautiful, the plot twist in the end was beautiful, and I can definitely see why it would make you cry. So if you're looking for a book to cry with, then I think this is a good recommendation. Please do read the trigger warnings before you read this one, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. Next up, we have another Kristen Hanna book because I am literally obsessed with her. I have been obsessed with her even if I read only one book by her, and this one just solidified it more. Now I have 2 more books by her on my TBR, and I actually cannot wait to read those books. This one is set in World War II and is a story of 2 sisters during that time. The book is, as you may have guessed, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, written with the same beauty as Four Winds. Four Winds is the other book that I have read by her. So written with the same beauty as Four Winds, similarly powerful, similarly impactful. I am obsessed with these characters. I'm obsessed with the pacing. I'm obsessed with the grayness of the characters, and obviously it's set in World War II, and you guys know I'm obsessed with the setting of World War II, reading books in that setting. So everything hit so well with this book. I did cry towards the end of this one too, because I don't know how you can't, and it also does have different POVs of the different sisters, so that just hits harder. I also read that it's actually based on a true story that just made the story so much more impactful for me. So if you're looking for a historical fiction, then you should definitely read this. Even if you are a beginner, you will enjoy it because it's so easy to read and it's very fast paced, especially compared to Four Winds. Four Winds was actually way slower than this one. If I was to recommend your first Kristen Hanna book, I would recommend this one. Next up, I have a horror recommendation that I recently read alone at night. I was alone that day in my house and I read this book. It was so much fun, and this one also is a 5-star read for me, which is just crazy. I thought of giving it a 4.5 star because the ending was a little like too crazy for me, but no, I've been thinking about it so much, and I have read so many like Reddit forums and things, and since I have been doing all of this analysis, I've come to a conclusion that this book is very beautifully written, very smartly written, and I cannot wait to actually reread this book. I also recommend you listening to the book if possible. It's available on Audible. The book is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cyber. This is a story of a couple who grabs a house at a very low price and they're renovating it it for their business. When this family comes to the house and the father is like, can we please have a look in the house with his family, because I grew up over here and I want to show my children where I grew up. Our main character, after a lot of thought, lets them in, but that is the point. You let them back in. You did it. No, you shouldn't have. The story unravels from there. As we move forward, it becomes crazier and crazier. The only thing that can be off-putting for you is that it ends off in an open-ended way, and I personally do not enjoy open endings, because I am just like, finish the book for me, because I will not get this content anywhere else, especially if there's no part 2 to the book. But the way this book ended, even if it was open-ended, I actually really enjoyed it when I look back at it, because if it was not open-ended, it would not have been this impactful. I think I should sit like this now because the sun is coming on my face. If it was not open-ended, it wouldn't have been this impactful, and so I actually really enjoyed the open-ended aspect of this book. Is it horrifying? Yes, but it does not have a lot of jump scares in it where you're just like, what happened? It builds up slowly within you. When the bell rang when I was reading this book, I was horrified, because I was like, what happened? Like, where am I? Because I was totally sucked into the book and the horror ambience of the book. Yes, it's also very ambient. We have The Authenticity Project by Claire Pooley, which is a story of the Authenticity Project. It is a notebook left by a very old man, and he has written his truth in it, that he is a lonely old man, and he encourages the stranger who picks this notebook up to write their truth in it and then pass along. And you basically see what happens with the Authenticity Project. This one also has multiple POVs in it of all of the people that interact with the Authenticity Project. And the best part of the book was how properly each relationship between these characters was developed. The pacing of this book is beautiful, and like all of Claire Pooley's book, this one also shows you just how important friendship and community is. And I personally want every single person on earth to read this book, because I really want the world to become like this. I really want strangers to behave with each other like this. I want the world to become a better place in this way, and so I want more and more people to read this and become more understanding, more empathetic, more loving towards each other, more kind and more helpful towards each other. And I think this book inspires that. I gave this book 5 stars. I love Claire Pooley. I will read anything she writes and probably give it 5 stars. Next up, I have I Know Who You Are by Alice Feeney, which is my new 5-star recommendation for a thriller, and I am so obsessed with it. It is actually gross, and it took me quite some time to come to terms with the fact that it's very gross, but I personally really enjoyed this book. It has the Alice Feeney magic in it, where till the last page you're just wondering what happened, first of all, and secondly, even if it is a thriller, Alice Feeney has written this book in a creepy way. Like, her writing style is creepy, so even if the plot twists have not yet hit, you are in that space with her, in that creepy space with her mentally, and I am obsessed with the writing style. It has a past and present timeline going on, and there is just so much more happening. It's a story of a wife who has been having a rough time with her husband, and now they have had a fight and she's questioning whether she wants to stay with him or not. And when she goes back home to solve things with her husband is not there. If you're a beginner, go ahead, pick this book up. It's going to be fun. Not for teenagers, because it's a lot of inappropriate things happen. Next up, we have If Only I Had Told Her by Laura Nowlin, which is the second book in If He Had Been With Me. And I have seen a lot of people say, why this book was not required, things like that. I am so happy that this book was released, because it gave me the closure that I needed after the first book. I mean, even if I did not get the closure, I would be fine, you know, but this one made the first book so much more realer. This one has the POV of Finn, but only a part of it is the POV of Finn. I'm not going to tell you what it's about because I don't want to give any spoilers, but it has part of the POV of Finn and then 2 other POVs that you see after the horrible thing that happened in the first book happens. And the POVs of the other 2 characters just made everything that happened in the first book so much more real for me, and it was devastating. The way I have cried, it's actually there in that video. The way it made me cry, it was devastating, literally devastating. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this book. I gave this 4 stars. The series itself is a 4-star series for me, but I always think about these characters. Next up, we have The Teacher by Frida McFadden, which I think I'm going to give this book 2 stars. This is the story of the teacher, and that's all I'm going to say, because if I tell you more, I don't even know why you're reading the book. It is one of the most predictable books that I have read by the author, and I do not like that at all. I did have fun while reading it, and I finished it so fast, and it is so good to read when you're in a reading slump, or if you're a complete beginner in the reading world, then yes, maybe you will enjoy the book, because you'll be like, oh, I did not see that coming. But as an avid thriller reader, there was nothing that I did not guess about the book, except a very tiny plot twist towards the end of the book. So only for the fun that I had, I'm giving it 2 stars, but apart from that, nothing else. Next up, we have Good Material by Dolly Alderton, which is a story of a comedian who has recently gone through a breakup, and we see how he is coping up with the breakup. It's a very mundane day-to-day book, but there are some parts of it that is written so beautifully, that defines what it is like to lose a person, even if they're not dead, and even if they're not your girlfriend or boyfriend, even if they're your friend, just basically losing people in your life, what it can feel like, how it is not something that just vanishes in one day or even 1 month, how it is a process. And then there's just so much more that happens in the second half of the book, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil it. Apart from that, it was nothing crazy, but if you have gone through a breakup, whether relationship wise or friendship wise, I highly recommend this book, and I gave it 3.75 stars. Now, a few books that I am in the middle of, or that I DNF'd. First up, I started reading We Solve Murders by Richard Osman, and I read a bit of it, and then I DNF'd it. I think I read 100 pages and then DNF'd it, because I want to save it for prime winter time, because it felt like a book that you want to read in prime winter time. It's so cozy. Next, I have Project Hail Mary, which I literally have, I think, 100 pages to go, but I just dropped it because it got a little too complicated for my reading slump brain. And then we have the Book of Form and Emptiness, which I have marked up at left and right because of how beautiful it is, and I was just like, I need to be in the right headspace to be able to read such a beautiful book. With that, we come towards the end of the video. The sun has set, so it's directly on my face. I'm sorry, the lighting is horrible, but I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I do hope you got at least one recommendation out of it. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Bye.